Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and a very warm welcome to our council meeting for Wednesday, the 6th of September 2023, and a warm welcome to guests and public residents in the chamber, in the gallery there. And I'd just like to start with, we'll open with a karakia and invite Councillor Fitzgerald to open for us. Thank you.
Tēnā tātou, tēnā koutou katoa, me karakia tātou. Tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tākie. Mr Mayor.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Now, if I could just explain, the meeting is being recorded, it's being live streamed on our Council's YouTube channel. And in terms of health and safety procedures, unlike the event of an emergency, if we could evacuate via the green signs and we assemble outside near the area near the clock tower, Te Maraehine, the square. In terms of smoking, please go to Fielding or somewhere a bit further away. But seriously, this is a non-smoking facility, and unlike the event of needing a defibrillator, that is located in the front of house on the ground floor. Any incidents, please talk to our administration team here. We have a couple of councillors online, and welcome to them, Councillor Leonie Harpiter and Councillor Karen Naylor. And if I could just ask officers if they could please, on the first time in speaking, just mention their name and title, please. Okay, so we will go to apologies first, and we have a recommendation there that Council received the apologies from Councillor Leonie Harpiter for departure and Councillor Katie Isabellin on Council business. So I'll look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If there's no commentary, we will vote, please. That is passed 14 votes for, none against. Thank you. I presume you voted for or would vote for, Councillor. Okay, we'll be counting your vote. I'm not redoing the vote. All right. Notification of any additional items. There is none. Declarations of interest. Councillor Harpiter on item 15 has declares an interest around the District Licensing Committee, but I believe will probably be gone from the meeting at that stage anyway. Councillor.
Item 16, which is the review process for the hearing of Commissioner list, the Chair of Strategy and Finance has been proposed to be on that selection committee, which is me, which I don't see as being a compromise for me participating. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Public comment. We don't have any public comment. So moving through to number 6, which is around a presentation, and I invite the Tertiary Education Union, and we have Te Awatea Ward, Harvey Jones and Ben Schmidt. Invite them to the front seats there. Welcome people, and Ben, you'll be well used to how this works, and welcome Te Awatea and Harvey.
Kia ora, Mayor. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Te Awatea Ward. Ben Schmidt is, I'm the co-branch president for Massey branch of TEU. Ben Schmidt is our organiser, and Harvey Jones on my right here is our TEU vice president. We'd like to speak to you today about 3 issues. One is what we want as a tertiary education union, then some of the things that are concerning us at the moment, and then we'll finish off with an ask, I suppose, of one for another term, you know, what we'd like for you as council to consider. So first off, as TEU and members of Te Kuinga Ngāti Purere Huroa, Massey University, we want a safe and secure place to work. We want Massey University to thrive, to be where staff and students are contributing members of the city's community and economy. We want Massey facilities, including Turitea Historic Area and sports facilities, to continue to be relevant and significant to Palmerston North and its residents. Palmerston North to continue to be a great place to live and a place that students will choose to come here to study. Harvey?
Just get these out. And the next one, please. Thank you. You would have seen the difficulties we had last year because there's a serious underfunding of the tertiary sector in New Zealand, leading to difficulties in paying their staff fairly. It's also led now to job cuts and redundancies. There's an admin finance review going on affecting 180 positions which were made redundant, with people, secretaries and admin staff having to reapply for the new jobs. There's a voluntary redundancy scheme of 285 positions as a target to be lost across the university at present. Combined with that is a drop in enrolments and fewer students on campus. That's a combination of the effects of COVID and the switch to online teaching, and we haven't had the students come bounding back into the classes. But also there's policy changes which are reducing the numbers of courses available for students, and also whether they're taught online only or in face-to-face activities. So all that combines in fewer students actually in the campus, and therefore fewer students at Massey University, Palmerston North, or the cities there, or the other cities we're at, campuses we're at. The economic and community impacts of these changes are really, really serious. We're talking, and if we talk of 200 staff being removed from the staffing, that's, if you take into account their families, that's an average of $100,000 each, which is $20 million to the Massey, the Palmerston North economy. Add to that the students and their staffing and their community interest in sporting, that's an economy of staffing supplies for the cafes, for the bars, for everything else, and the spending that they do in the city. The lack of meaningful consultation and engagement with the stakeholders is a problem we're trying to address. We're working through that, and it's difficult with the university at the moment because we raise our voices, they're not too keen on talking to us. And of course there's a decline in reputation to this university and the city. If we lose the reputation of the university, the students won't come to Palmerston North, which affects your city, our city.
Thank you. And so, it is no understatement to say that we are looking at a crisis for Massey University with prospects of hundreds of job losses. As Harvey has said, each one of those is a person, a family, losing that employment. Many of those people may go elsewhere to other cities or to other countries where job prospects are more attractive, especially in academia. But it's not just about the economic impacts, that impacts on our community, social arts groups, which make fabric of the city. We've seen the impacts on Summer Shakespeare of these cuts at Massey University. So this affects all of us, and we are asking you to work together. Massey is not only a crucial part of Palmerston North, but also we see Palmerston North as being a part of the wider Massey community as well. So we ask you to engage with the university management and the University Council. Talk to those people that you have relationships, connections with, from the council perspective, the sports, the arts, the community, to communicate that we cannot afford to lose these jobs from our community, and that impacts all of us. We also due to speak up to MPs and to government about increasing the funding for the tertiary sector. We want to be working towards tripartite conversations with the government, with the Vice-Chancellors and with the unions for a better tertiary system that benefits our region and that benefits all of us. Local government has a key role to play in advocating there as well. And thirdly, continue to work with us and continue to talk with us. We are open to engaging with all of you. We are a part of this community, and it will take all of us working to work to save jobs and change this situation. Thank you. Open to taking any questions or comments.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben, Aotea, and Harvey as well. So, yes, we have some questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for your presentation. I just wondered what the response of students has been. If you could talk to us a bit about that, like our local students and at Massey, and how they're responding.
The students at Massey have come together and formed a group, Students Against Cuts. They are totally opposed to the number of cuts that have been happening, because students are enrolling in courses and then finding out that they can't complete their second and third year because those courses are being cut. They know the staff are under pressure. They feel hesitant to actually ask for help from staff because they can see that the staff don't know whether they're going to have a job soon. In regards to the staff engaging with the students have been amazing support. They really have. And we try and keep our personal problems about job security to ourselves. But in any situation where you're learning and you're forming quite a personal relationship with students that you're teaching, the students can see the level of stress staff are experiencing. I'd like to also acknowledge the number of students that are sitting here behind us today who have come out in support, including the Students Against Cuts. Yeah, it's impacted them significantly. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. And can you just talk about morale among staff at Massey? What's that like at the moment?
Very, very low. Despondency. We've had comments from staff who have been working 38, 40 years who say they've wasted their time. You know, they just don't see Massey University as being a preferred employer and are actively looking for positions elsewhere. There's staff that aren't covered by the voluntary enhanced cessations. They're just saying, well, hey, look, we're done with this employer.
And just to add to that as well, when staff are not secure in their employment, with morale as it is, people are not in the same position to be involved in their communities, be involved in the city, because they're focused on trying to keep their head above the water. We need staff to have secure employment so they can be a part of and they can contribute to the city in wider ways as well.
Councillor Bowen.
Mr. Mayor, and thank you for coming in to speak to us today and for your support as we've gone through some of these issues, particularly around arts and sports in the city. I wanted to ask, so this conversation about tertiary education is bigger than Massey. We see that conversation across the Motu. How is the Massey conversation different, or is it part of the same conversation?
There are elements, there are elements that are the same, but there are elements that are different. Last week, I was privileged to go speak to Minister Giantinetti about funding for the greater tertiary sector. There is an element, but there seems to be quite enough money at Massey to build buildings, to set up another university in Singapore, where the students will be taught face to face, but not enough to sustain what we've got here, which has been a model that has worked for our students in the past. So now staff are being asked to quit their jobs. They did say in the media that the funding's coming from elsewhere, you know, Massey Global for Singapore. However, you know, I'm not that up there as an academic, but my thinking is if you've got money to send overseas, why not invest it in your community and the people that live here?
Thank you. There's quite a lot of nodding behind you on that one. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Mayor, o tira, tēnā tātou ngā mihi nui ki a koutou te hautū kahurangi I tai mai I tēnei wā. Nō reira whaia, o tira kōrua koutou kei muri rā tēnā koutou. Thank you very much for coming. I know last year you had called a meeting and I was fortunate enough to go prior to I think it might have been September, August, September. And so I know that you've been looking and working on this. I'm perhaps going to give some comment as opposed to a question, but I just want to say that having previously worked as a lecturer at Massey, I understand the pressures you're under. That was a very long time ago when I was there, but I do, you know, applaud the work that you do. We have a reputation as a university
Is there a question?
city. No, but a comment was invited, Your Worship. And I just want to say that every member of Massey University staff, academic, non-academic, are valued members of Palms North City, and we appreciate you coming. Nō reira, koera taku whakaro tautoko. Sorry, Your Worship, that was I'm going on the comment part there. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora koe o te mihi. One of the things that concerned me last year was 91% of the admin and finance staff that were restructured were women. So then you've got issues of part-time insecure work, and child poverty comes into play there too, if you want to really go down that rabbit hole. So kia ora koe o te kōrero.
All right, we've well and truly exhausted the time, so thank you very much, Te Awatea, Harvey and Ben. Appreciate you bringing the issue to us. We know it exists and we thank you very much for that. I'm going to allow some comments because I think it's a very big subject for us. So are there any comments from councillors? I've already had one from the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to comment that I think there was a very good point made amongst many in the presentation that we all need to be working together on this. This isn't something that the TEU branch on its own, or Students Against Cuts on their own, or us on our own can fix. We actually need, as we do for other regional issues, we actually need to band together and to talk to Massey Council and also potentially the government about what measures are needed to enable the success of the university in the city. The university's success impacts on the city's success and our community's success. And so it's not going to be enough for one group on their own to try and get some change here. I do think it would be very useful for us all to come together and to pool our resources, pool our strengths, and actually advocate as one group to Massey Council initially, and then perhaps to government as a whole, to say, you can't let this university just sink under the waves. It's been subjected to difficult pressures over the last few years, not the least of which is the international student market that we know still hasn't returned back to normal. And it's not going to be good for the future either of our city or of our country as a whole to let universities go under like this. So really something has to be done, and I commend you for bringing the presentation to us today, but also I think a united force would be very useful at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And without repeating what my learned councillor colleague, Councillor Johnson, has just said, completely agree that whilst we might be referred to and regarded as local government, there are things that we can lobby for, and this has got to be one of them. So the Tertiary Education Commission are responsible for advocating for funding from the Minister that we heard from this morning. So perhaps we could, as Councillor Johnson said, come together and form some sort of lobby partnership, and we might be able to drive some of that work as well, being the local council. Thank you.
Online, Councillor Harpiter. Councillor Harpiter, you've got your mute on.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Having worked at Massey for 10 years,
Hold on, Councillor, we're having some technical problems.
sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So just wanted to say very quickly that having worked at Massey for 10 years as a staff member, it's very hard to see Massey going through these, making these decisions as a council. And I just think that as us as a city council, I think that we listen to what Councillor Johnson, we do need to support these decisions, but we need to, as a community, need to come together and try and support and not try and stop, because we can't. Massey Council needs to make those decisions, but we need to try and sort of see what we can do as a community, because we don't want to see these losses in our community. It's a big employer and we don't want to see those losses, but it is very hard for the Massey Council to go through these economic times, and it's just very, very tough. And I just wanted to just acknowledge those decisions that they are making at this time, because it is a very tough economic time at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to follow on from where I was in my questions, I think to say that these aren't just job cuts, they're cuts into our community. And if we haven't felt the pain of that already, I think we're starting to, and we certainly will as this continues. You know, as a council, we published a document called Our Asks quite recently. I actually think this should be one of our asks to central government, that Massey is an important part of the tertiary sector. It's critical to Palmerston North. It's one of our key relationships. A thriving tertiary sector is a thriving Massey, and a thriving Massey is a thriving Palmerston North. I think it would be a sensible addition to our asks of central government. But I think we also have an ask of Massey as an organisation, that they engage genuinely, maybe, in consultation with the wider community, that decisions that are made aren't just put out to staff, but that contribution is invited from council and the wider community, because we know that the decisions that impact on Massey's people will impact on our community, and council is often found as the funder of last resource, the last man standing, the body that's expected to step into the gap. And so I think it would be nice if Massey talked to us about what that might look like. So thank you for bringing this to us today.
Councillor
Barrett. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, and thank you particularly to the representatives of TEU, Student Cuts, and those that have come in. It is quite disturbing, it is quite concerning to hear this, to see this. Most of it's been said already, but I simply want to reiterate that the connection between the university and this city is like those of twins, incredibly close, and we must make sure as a city that we have a continued strong university presence at the heart of our community. And so thank you for bringing your concerns to this table, and certainly endorse the comments from others in terms of having a collective response to those concerns.
I'll finish off. Thank you. Thanks to my colleagues for commenting. If we go back Sir Joseph Nathan's son, Frederick Nathan, who was the then mayor of the city nearly 100 years ago, advocated to government for the establishment of Massey University. Councillor Barrett is right. If anybody speaks about Palmerston North, normally Massey comes up in the conversation somewhere. So we are sort of intertwined in a sense. And I mean, I again just want to thank the TEU, but actually there's been a lot of others that have been commenting as well. So it's a chorus that you're continuing to hear from all around the place, and you'd have to be living under a rock to not understand what is going on. So there is as the city and certainly as the mayor, we do have a relationship with Massey, but it is at a macro level for myself with the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor. But I will reach out to them, as well as the TEC and our various MPs and the Minister, who I have to say have been somewhat silent on it as well. So it is about, look, some of the comments that have been made, the decline in reputation, the staff culture, it is tough because all sides are facing some really challenging decisions, but I suppose it's the way you do it as well. And ultimately, it's around making sure that the university still has a status, which it has absolutely earned over the last almost 100 years. So it's upon us to make sure that we are advocating at the very highest level. So thank you for coming in, and you can take away that we will be having some discussions. Thank you for formally bringing it to us. I think it needed to come to the chamber, and appreciate all the commentary and the support in the gallery as well. So thank you.
Thank you for your support today, and look forward to working with all of you to address this.
Okay, so councillors, we have the recommendation to council that we receive the Tertiary Education Union's presentation for information. I'm happy to move it. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I probably should have at the start. And we've commented, so we'll now vote, please. We'll have to change your technology there, councillor, at the break, but we'll just have to get your verbal vote as we go through. Thank you. All right, that has passed 14 votes for, none against. Thank you. All right, we move through now to okay, next is our, on our order paper is our confirmation of minutes and recommendation to council that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 16th of August 2023, part 1, public and part 2, confidential, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move those. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any matters arising. There being none, we will look to vote, please. Thank you, councillor. That has passed 13 votes for with 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, we now come to get my item 8 on our order paper, and this is a notice of motion around the extension of free parking provisions for Super Gold card holders, and that's Councillor Billy Meehan. And Councillor, I'll pass it to you if you want to click your to it. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse my throat. I've been yelling at grandkids. Just correct me or guide me here. Do we need to vote on the revocation first, or do we just go straight into the motion?
Yeah, that's a good point. We could do it either way, but let's just do it properly. We'll vote on number 1 first, is around that council revoke the following resolution adopted by the Community Committee on the 9th of August, clause 2823. That committee refer the matter of extending free parking provisions for Super Gold card holders to be included in the development of the parking framework. That's moved obviously by yourself and seconded by Councillor Wood. Okay, so we'll look to vote on that first. Is there any comments on that?
Yeah, if I could just say, Mr. Mayor, that the reason of bringing this was the last vote was very close at a 6-7. A number of councillors were away, and I also believe that one of the councillors that voted that day was a little confused with the system that we had going on. So I'll just the reason for bringing it forward.
Okay, all right. Now, councillors, those that are in the queue want to speak on number 1? Okay, all right, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to speak on number 1 because I see 1 and 2 as quite separate things. We do have a parking framework piece of work underway. It would be important whether we decide to go ahead and advance the parking conversation of number 2 or not, to have that considered as part of the parking framework decision. I can't see that the parking framework would not think about the parking for seniors if we are already doing it. It should be included. So I don't think that revoking the first one is necessary to uplift the second. And for me, I would like to see the discussion about provision for Super Gold card holders be included in the parking framework and not specifically excluded from that future discussion. So I think for me, these are 2 separate issues, and I don't see them being in conflict.
Okay, Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd just like to echo the thoughts of Councillor Bowen. Is that at our workshop last week, we actually came to a position whereby this was likely to be, or was going to be, referred into the parking framework, and of course I've got a lot of other comments that I can make in terms of the importance of making sure that we actually get this part of the management of our CBD, and in particular our retail industry, which I can bring back into this conversation a little bit further down the track. But this matter does need to be referred into the parking framework so that we actually get a rational decision about what it is we expect for our CBD, particularly in terms of parking. Those are my initial comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just really a question through you to either governance or legal. That do we actually need to pass 1 in order to make a decision on 2?
You'll need to let me. Oh no, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would be my position we don't need to revoke the first in order for the second.
We don't. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I'll have a comment then, if that's okay. Yeah. I'm not going to support that we revoke the resolution that we agreed on at the Community Committee. I do think it would be very sensible to include this in the parking framework, and also remember that the parking framework will be consulted on. And so I think we particularly do want to hear from people as to what their opinion is about this, and not just those who will be benefiting from it, but perhaps those who might be affected in other ways. So I think it'd be very sensible to keep this clause in. Whatever the decision is about 2, I think that this I don't think we should take this out of the bigger discussion. We need to keep it in. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'll have more to say on 2 in a moment.
Okay. Councillor Mann, do you need a right of reply?
I probably just need some understanding. So we can leave this in the parking framework, but still vote today to allow extended parking. Okay. Well, I'm happy with that.
Good. All right, councillors. So you've got the understanding there that this is about, we can still discuss 2, but this is about revoking the community committee decision about adding it to the parking framework. So I think the clarity around that was important. Thank you. Thank you to colleagues there. So ask you to vote, please. Okay, we're going to rerun the vote, please. Right, I'll just ask you to re-vote, please. We had a couple vote the wrong way because they told me they had. That has failed. 5 votes for, 10 against. Okay. So we're now moving through to number 2. And again, that is from the notice of motion of Councillor Meehan. And that the gold card, I'm struggling to read that, gold card parking be extended from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday to Friday to 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday to Friday. So moved by Councillor Meehan, seconded by Councillor Wood, and I'll invite you, Councillor Meehan, to speak to this again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quite simply, it's, like I say, last time was a close vote. The parking management plan, my understanding, could I just get a check with officers? Do we have a parking management plan in place at this stage?
Yeah, he's right. He can speak.
Yeah, yes or no?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question? Where is the parking management framework?
Do we have a parking management plan in place at the moment?
There was a parking management plan adopted by the council in 2016, I think it was. It was a very operational document which provided some specific responses to some issues at the time in and around certain areas. Terrace End was one from memory, but it was not certainly not the document that's envisaged with the parking framework which has been developed at the moment, as we talked about in the workshop last week, which was a more high-level, long-term strategic document that's looking to influence our long-term approach to parking.
Thank you. That was in 2015. I recall playing around with that one, and here we are in 2023 redoing it. So my thing is, I don't think for a simple thing like giving super gold card holders a couple of hours extra free parking needs to go through that whole process. Happy for it, like Councillor Thompson said, to sit in there and be looked at. But I think the issue today is to give a couple of hours extra free parking to super gold card holders. When this motion was originally brought forward in May, the councillors that were against it, their issue was they wanted a report from officers. The report came back from officers and clearly said, no big cost, no big deal. We then moved the goalpost and went to a parking management plan. What I see here is the goalposts are going to keep being moved, okay? These people have paid rates for 50 plus years. They've been here a long time, a lot longer than some of the councillors around the table. And I think under our claim of being an age-friendly city, we want the title, we want the certificate, but do we really want to do it? There's no cost to us. There's no issue. It's just giving flexibility to some elderly people to go into town when they feel like it during the day. The morning doesn't suit some people. The afternoon does. I don't think we're going to see an influx of thousands of elderly people shooting into town all of a sudden and partying up. You know, I just don't think it's going to happen. It's just going to give them some flexibility during the day. And I think every one of us sitting around this table, they have 24/7 free parking, okay, could at least offer that privilege to those elderly people that have been in our city for such a long, long time, and have paid their rates for that time, and they don't ask for a lot really. Some footpaths, okay, and a bit of free parking. Not a biggie, not a biggie. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor, for now.
Councillor Johnson.
Mr Mayor, understanding order 2.25.2, is this not a second repeat where notice of motion was rejected?
It's first repeat. Yeah, that's the advice I've got. It was never tabled, it was received but never tabled.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, I understand now. Thank you. Would you like to make my comment now? Yeah, thank you. I'm not quite sure where to start here. But anyway, let's start with the fact that seniors already get 3 hours free parking and have done for very many years, every single day. So it's not as if seniors are not getting anything at the moment. They are already getting the free parking, and what this is a request to extend that further. So I'm not sure why this has become such an urgent issue that it's required a notice of motion to council. I would have thought we would be much more sensible in making our decisions to consult on the parking framework with this as an option and to actually hear from the full community. So at the committee meeting, at the community committee meeting, we heard from the Disability Reference Group about how their members felt that they certainly would benefit from some free parking. We're aware of other groups that feel that they have a request for free parking. For example, those who have volunteers doing business in the central city who are paying parking fees to do their volunteering work. There may well be others. And in addition to that, we haven't heard from businesses in particular who might be affected by people parking and staying for longer in the parks. And so I just feel that this is premature to bring this at this stage. I'm not opposed to it in principle, but I want to have all of the facts before I make a decision. And I do feel that perhaps there was perhaps an intentional misrepresentation of the officers' comments by the mover. The officers didn't say that there was no problem. The officers' recommendation was that it be considered as part of the parking review consultation. So let's be clear about what the officers did actually say. So I just think if we are to make fair and reasonable decisions based on listening to what the community wants, it involves listening to the whole community. And I understand that some councillors are members of Grey Power who brought the original request and are advocating strongly for their group. I understand that. But it does behove us to make decisions on behalf of the whole city, and not just one particular group who might benefit from a particular decision. And on the basis that we already have a significant regular free parking for seniors, I think this should wait until we've had public consultation. We've heard back from businesses, and I do remind you again that the last time we made a decision on parking without any public consultation, it came back to bite us on the bum. So let's not do that again.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No surprise, I'll support this, of course. And we're talking about numbers, and when we had the the officer's report, it talked about how many people had Gold Card in Palmerston North. But when you look at the actual numbers that use the Gold Card parking, it's less than a quarter of the people who are entitled to use it. So not all people with Gold Card use Gold Card parking, but the ones that do pay for it. And when we looked at the officer's figures, we actually gained on what the $10 a year was, because the older people are not there every day. They might be in town once a week. And when you look at the groups that came and supported it, there was Grey Power, of course. There was Age Friendly Palmerston North. There was Council's senior, the Older Persons Advisory Group. There was the Disability Group. They came and they supported it, as their point was that most of their members, not all, but most, were over 65 and had Gold Card. The voluntary sector was here in strength. We had the people from the CPA, a whole lot of them came in and asked that the volunteers, who most of them, and they said most of them, had Gold Card and they would benefit from it. Because a lot of the people who don't have Gold Card are still working. If you go down to the volunteers, see who the volunteers are in the city, a majority of the volunteers in the city during the day are people who are over 65. Now, we all know that. I think for us to vote for this today not only helps the volunteers in our city save a little bit of money and be more available. One lady said she would be able to come in the afternoon and help at the Citizens Advice Centre. She couldn't do that at the moment because she couldn't afford to. By giving this extra 3 hours, more people in this community would be able to volunteer and help, let alone the 1 or 2 people who come in to go to the doctors, who go to the physio, etc., etc. And the shopkeepers and the businesses that I've spoken to are all in support of it. I have not heard one negative comment. I'd urge you all to vote for it. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As has been stated by Councillor Johnson, I'm actually going to oppose this. And I'm going to give you some very good reasons as to why, at this point in time, this is not a good idea. Like Councillor Johnson, I supporting our seniors all the time, but not at the cost of others. There are currently roughly around about 3,500 seniors who are actually using the Gold Card parking exemption, and that gives them 3 hours free parking in the city each day. There are potentially 11,000 of these Gold Card holders who could pick up the parking exemption, and I'll come back to that in a little while. If you had read Staff Feeler in the week, you'll realise that Feeling has actually got a little bit of a problem with their parking. And retailers over there can't even go and sort out the parking issues over a cup of coffee because it has become so toxic. And that is because the car parks are being taken up by staff members of the businesses in Feeling. So therefore, we have to be cognizant of the pressures on parking in our CBD. If we go to our papers today and you go to page 143, you'll actually see that people's satisfaction or loss of satisfaction has actually dropped from 55% to 41% in the last 4 years. So people are not happy with the state of parking in our city. The next point is that last week at the Economic Growth Committee meeting, we heard from Stacey Bell, our economist, and she talked about the importance of retail to our city in terms of our economy. And I'll just remind you all of some of the facts on this. Our CBD retail industry brings into our city $834 million last year. It is a net gain for our city when we think of our residents going spending elsewhere of $300 million. There is a $300 million reason why this, at this point in time, is a very bad idea. Our retail industry actually employs 8,500 people, roughly. So when we start to actually pinch the retail industry, then we actually start to cut off our own hands, right? We had a workshop, and in that workshop, I think we came to a consensus that this matter should actually be referred through to the parking framework. And that means that this will be considered in the entirety, in the overall picture of what it is that we actually want to do. A vote to support this today is actually a vote against the people who drive a big part of our local economy. Sometimes we have to vote against our own constituency. The people who actually voted for me are likely to have been the people who actually support this particular motion. But for the good of the city, I'm actually going to vote against it for now. I may very well come back at a later stage and actually support this fully, but only when I know the facts. So when we think about 3,500 people, perhaps potentially going to 8,000, 11,000 people who are actually going to actually take up this option of this exemption, that's more than doubling it. We then double the amount of time that these people could actually use the free parks in the city. And you can actually start to see now, we're beginning to get a compounding problem. Link that back to the satisfaction survey for our citizens, and we're actually doubling it down again. So please don't support this now. Push it through to the parking framework, and let's come to a rational decision in terms of how we manage our CBD. It is precious to us. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, I'll just make a quick comment because I just need to correct a couple of comments that have been made. There's not 3,500 signed up, Councillor, there's 2,400. And it's not every day, it's Monday to Friday that we're talking about. Okay, so I just want to correct that. And I understand we are referring this back to, we just voted on that, to the parking plan. So just want to correct some of the commentary there. Comparing Fielding to Palmerston North parking, very, very long bow. And I'm quite surprised by some of the commentary. Only a couple here have experienced business, and I think there's only one ex-retailer amongst us. I invite you at morning tea to go and have a look out the window and count the cars. I invite you to walk around the city at 9 a.m. or at maybe 10:30 and count the cars. The CBD is really brittle. And some of you have commented that you're strong supporters of the seniors, you're strong supporters of the business and the retailer sector. Well, I'm not seeing a lot of it. We lost 100+ jobs in retail in the last couple of months, and there's probably more to come. the for lease and sale signs and vacancies have started to increase. We've just gone through a presentation on what may happen around jobs as well. I'll put my house on it that the retailers and business sector would welcome this because it's filling some gaps. And I think over saying that there's 11,000 people parking out there, I think, where are we? Don't think that's... Anyway, we can all make up numbers like we want to. And actually, let's not mix it up with other groups. We're talking about the aged care or the senior sector here. We're not moving the goalpost to somewhere else. Otherwise, let's have another discussion about, and the motion on the table was quite different. Super Gold card holders are a group that have paid rates, and many in the city, for a long, long time. I think Councillor Finlay put the comment up that we were trying to look at or it might have been Councillor Meehan, around our application and our serious application around being an age-friendly city. This goes a long way towards it, if we vote this down. But most of all, it does support a sector that's really, really struggling. And I just would ask some of you to open your eyes and go out there and have a look. Can we improve it? Absolutely we can. And we're not talking about filling gaps at the most important times, which are a little bit later in the afternoon, the after fives as well, which we know is quite strong in the city. But look, I realise some levels of risk around us and acceptance of policy is different around the table. But actually the risk here is exceptionally low. The greater risk is actually not supporting it and seeing another couple of hundred retail jobs go. She's very brittle, and this goes a long way for supporting some of our sectors, our aged care sectors, which are struggling socially and not being able to come into the city. And they need a little bit more time because they need time to think about where they're going and everything else. So yes, 3 hours on a Monday to Friday is a start. And look, we can refer it back to the parking plan as well. So there's a buck each way on this as well. So I urge you to strongly support this. Some of us weren't in the room too when this was pushed through at a committee. So it's enabling three of us to have a say that weren't in the room. So I urge you to support it. The risk is incredibly low. The risk is higher for those people. Let's be honest, the parking framework won't come back to us for at least a year. So we're going to be waiting another year. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. Thank you to Councillor Meehan for the now monthly opportunity to have a debate around what we're going to do with this particular matter. I'll start with posing the question of whether it's really free parking. And I think when you actually consider it, the answer to that is quite clearly no. It's just parking that somebody else pays for. And who wouldn't like that? I mean, it's only natural. It's only natural. In this case, it's actually getting paid for twice. Not only are we having to pay for the lost revenue, but we're also having to pay for the increased enforcement effort around getting out and checking cars that appear to be parked without payment, but in fact have a sticker in their window. So there's kind of two layers of costs that we're basically loading into everyone's pockets so that a few people can enjoy something that undeniably sounds attractive on the face of it. So I think the proper way here to get at what we should or shouldn't be doing around any adjustments to free parking allocations in the city is to go out and ask the community, and to ask the community through the parking framework. And we might even start the question with who would like somebody else to pay for their parking? Because fundamentally that's what we're talking about here. And I think we would see a very long queue at the door. We would hear from everyone around that, and then we could arrive at a decision around who should pay for who else's parking. But I'm not prepared today to be pushing this forward without having that conversation with the community. There's 3 hours of parking, they're already there free for this particular part of the community. They clearly do enjoy that, and I think that's quite appropriate at this stage until we get to the parking framework overall. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. I will clearly be voting against this.
Councillor Harper, online.
Right, can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll be voting for this. I'm a retailer, as you all know. Very happy to support this. I think happy to support this sector as a retailer. So I just wanted to put my views forward. I think retail is 7 days a week. Retail goes 9 o'clock in the morning through to probably 12 o'clock at night. So retail is not the norm, and it goes all day. Parking does go right through, the wardens are out till 9 o'clock at night. So at the end of the day, it's not what we used to be. It is quite different. So I'm just fully supportive of this. I think what we're doing in this instance is the right thing to do for the seniors, and I do support this motion going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start by alleviating any concerns my colleagues might have that I'm supporting this because I'm a member of Grey Power. I haven't found any yet. I'm supporting this because it's the right thing to do for our community. I want to put a call on this debate that hasn't been put forward already. This only costs us any money if it works. If we have the same group of people that are parking for the same amount of time as currently are using it, it's going to cost us between $16,000 and $32,000, which is what we're already currently paying each year. So this is only going to cost us any money as a council if we have an additional person who comes into town and stays for longer because of a result of this policy. So this is only going to cost us if more people come into town and more people spend more time in town. And I can only see that as a good thing for our community and for our retail sector. I want to say I have a willingness to respond if this doesn't work. If there is some grand retail apocalypse and businesses start going out of business because, goodness, there's too many people in town spending too much money, then I will move the motion to return it to 12 p.m. in 6 months or 12 months' time if this isn't working. But your risk appetite, councillors, is exceptionally low. We said at that committee that we wanted to get a report on how much it would cost, because absolutely we shouldn't make decisions without knowing how much those decisions cost. It came back and it said the cost was reasonably low, 12 to 32,000, if the amount of people using it doubled, which as I just said is unlikely, but let's say it did. We're now saying we need another number of reports on what the consequences of this will be. I don't need a report to tell me if people spend more time in town, they're going to spend more money. As the Mayor said, it is not like our CBD is chocker 24/7 and that there is no space or capacity for these people to use it. In terms of the question of, well, what about other groups that might want it, this doesn't exclude other groups from being considered down the track. I have absolutely no issue with considering extension or better provision of parking for those with disabilities, for those in the volunteer sector. And when they come to us with proposals and we can have that conversation, I'm more than happy to. But we already have a group here where we have an established framework, we know how it works, and this is simply extending the period of time that they're able to use it. It is ludicrous that we have people in the city who it hits lunchtime and they say, right, I'm going home. I'm not going to stay for lunch with friends because I don't have free parking. I have to come back another day. It is the opportunity cost for those individuals who would go, well, I would stay, but why would I when I can get free parking in the morning? So this is extending that to provide greater opportunities for people who qualify for this kind of support. The suggestion that businesses might be opposed and that, well, when we had other car parking issues discussed, people kicked up a fuss. Well, this is very different to increasing the price of parking or increasing the times of parking. This is about providing affordable parking to those through the gold card system that we have. So this is a very different issue to be comparing to what the councillors faced last time. In terms of community-wide public consultation, that the whole community must consult on any issue that is of interest to a certain group of people. We didn't do that with Puriri Terrace last week. We didn't say, oh, well, goodness, we're going to spend money that could be spent putting jutta bars on another road, to put it on Puriri Terrace. Therefore, goodness, we need to go to a full community-wide consultation on that because there might be some people who think we shouldn't put jutta bars on Puriri Terrace because that's going to cost them what they could have had jutta bars on their street. No, of course we don't do that because we respond to the needs of the community in this chamber when those needs are brought into us. What a ridiculous suggestion that every single decision we make needs to go through full community-wide consultation. We are able to make decisions in this chamber when we know what the cost is and when we know that the community wants it, and I see no issue in responding to that need. The idea that supporting this is at the cost of others is just not true. I don't think any councillor that is supporting this today would say no to considering another group's proposal if they came in and asked for a similar kind of support. I know I certainly would support other groups in their endeavours. The $300 million reason I think is a very interesting one. The $300 million retail reason is all the more reason to support this proposal. If every single park in our city centre was full 24/7, that would be a good thing for our retailers, not a bad thing. If we had so many people in town spending so much money that our retailers would complain, that would be another good reason to build a parking building so that we could have more people filling into our CBD, not less. I'm not sure what your fear is here, councillors, that we have too many people using our CBD, spending time in it and spending money. What is the concern here? We've made such a mountain out of a molehill. This debate has got so angry over something so little. We're getting a compounding problem because half the councillors in this room keep voting to remove parks from our city centre. This is filling parks, not removing them. This is bringing people in, not pushing them out. This is encouraging people to come into our CBD and spend money, not discouraging them and
Councillor,
causing them
we'll
to
wind it
move
up.
to other areas. So, look, this is the right thing to do. Just take a risk, a little risk for goodness sake, and I'll propose rescinding it if it doesn't work, but I guarantee you I will not be having to make that proposal.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to jump into this debate, but having heard some of the comments being made has actually pushed me to get into this. I believe in good decision making, and as an elected member, I believe I've been elected to make good decisions based on evidence-based decisions. And I believe by voting for this, we're actually putting the horse before the cart. First of all, in as much as I believe that our council should continue to work towards a city that meets the needs of our elderly and ensure that Palmy remains a desirable place for our seniors to live in, I'll be voting against this because it's not good decision making. You know, we have a parking framework coming up, and we had a workshop on this that is consistent. Officers have consistently told us that this could be considered as part of a parking framework so that the views of the wider community can be taken into account and the wider impacts, whether it be economic, social, or in terms of revenue, could be actually assessed. And we've heard a lot of conversation here today that, you know, these people have been paying rates for a long time. We are all rate payers. And the assumption that we should be giving certain, and I support this in principle. I do support this in principle, but I want to support it as part of the parking framework. And to assume that we hate our elderly or seniors because we're voting against is simply not true. And that's the argument that some elected members have been pushing here, and I reject that. I want to support our elderly. I want to make sure that Palmer's not a desirable place for our elderly, but we want to do it in a good way, following good process, good decision-making process, not making policy on the hoof or responding to populist ideals, and not just representing a particular group in a community that we think we're going to get votes from. And I believe all the people have voted for me as well. But I believe also in good decision-making process. And spending more time in the CBD does not always equate to spending more money in the CBD. If you want to discourage, or if you want to encourage a high turnover in the CBD, put parking rates up. That's how you discourage more people from parking for a longer time in the CBD. If we want to bring more people in the CBD, because the issue at the moment, especially in our CBD, is that people cannot find car parks. And you do that by raising parking fees to discourage people from parking longer. That creates more room for people to park. And that encourages more people to come, knowing that, you know, I'm able to find, or I'll be able to find a car park if I go and do my business. And if my business takes more than 2 hours, then you pay more. Simple. So I reject the notion that has been made earlier, that voting against this is not supporting our elderly. And yes, to the mayor, who said earlier, walk past our CBD. Have a look at our CBD. And I spend a lot of my time in the CBD. A lot of my business, every day I'm in the CBD, and I see the needs. And I see our parking and how full they are. But because our parking fees are so low, that's why we're also seeing a lot of people parking there. And we see the examples of Wellington. In order to discourage people parking longer in the CBD, they increase the parking fees. And other cities have done so. So I reject the notion that voting against this is not supporting the elderly. And I support good process, and we need to follow good process this by putting this as part of a parking review. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, colleagues. Normally I have to go to the theatre to get my drama, but it's all here today. And there is nothing quite like a parking debate, is there? Possibly with the exception of potholes. That might also trigger this kind of response. I agree with many of the things that have been said by both sides of this debate. Of course, Councillor Wood is correct. We are able to make decisions about any random thing that comes into our head in this chamber, and often we do. But as Councillor Michelad said, that doesn't make them good decisions. We had a workshop last week to talk about the principles we thought were important to bring to this debate, because clearly, without principles, we are just blowing in the wind here, reacting to whichever voice speaks most loudly, most recently, to our most eloquent councillors who will hold forth as if this was the pulpit of the local church. However, in that discussion about principles, we talked about how our retail sector, and the members with close experience of retail were particularly keen on this principle, that we should not allow all-day parking. The feeling was very strongly, just last week in an open workshop, check the records, that all-day park needed. Now, there was some discussion about that and a suggestion that maybe we should talk to the sector. I understand Palmy Bid are already doing that work and have canvassed the retail sector of the central city, but we don't know what the outcome is yet. It will come through our framework consultation document. So, if we hold the view that all-day parking is not a principle that we want to go out with in our parking framework, why would we then be allowing all-day parking for a particular sector, deserving though they undoubtedly are, a particular sector of our community? 9 till 3 is all-day parking, pretty much, and that will cause the problems. Yeah, the Mayor is probably right to say fielding into the conversation is a bit of a long bow, but there is certainly learning there as to what happens when people can park for free for extended periods of time. And so I won't support this in advance of the parking framework consultation. It's important that we go out to our whole community, particularly including the Chamber of Commerce, the bid, our retail sector, and get a feel for what the actual consequences of this might be, because at the moment we're in the realm of unintended consequences and speculation, and that's not a place I'm comfortable making a decision. So I'll be referring this through to the parking framework happily and waiting for that consultation. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, I was one of the members not in the room when this was voted on last time, so welcome being able to vote positively here for this today. Just a couple of points. You go to town for a reason. You go to town to spend money. Retail is struggling. I see this as cost as being very minimal, if any cost at all. It gives the elders in our city options. So I see this as being a positive thing. That's all. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Meehan, write a reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interesting. All-day parking. That's simply fixed by putting time limits in. Well, okay. Whizzes. Make good decisions. I hope so. We got buses going to run everywhere. We've just done a new plan on that. I noticed they don't go around Clyde Crescent. That's good for the elderly that live around there. Someone else pays. Yeah, the 11,000 holders of gold cards, they're paying for it, because there's only 2,400 using them. Ask people's views. We want to consult. Well, I've done a fair bit of that over the last few weeks while going through this. Okay? And I haven't heard anybody be real negative on it at all. Definitely not retailers. Definitely. That's not true. So you're calling me a liar, councillor. Is that right?
Councillor, can we'll just keep to the facts.
So he's entitled to do that.
No, councillor, stick to the facts, come on. We want to keep this seemly, please.
The comments made about last time parking and the uproar, that was simply about cost that it was up. The amount of cost we wanted to put parking up, that was what the uproar was. Only morning free parking, yes, this is from 9 till 3, but it's flexibility, it's options for these people who, like I said, don't go into town to party. They go for reasons. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll pretty well leave it there. I think people will make the right decision.
Okay, thank you, councillors. All right, we will vote. And that is passed, 9 for and 6 against. All right, councillors, we might break there. I think it's needed. And we'll be back in the chamber at 22. Thank you.
means, or that borrowing means it looks like our debt's higher than what it would otherwise be, and it is, but it's offset by the investment that we have to match it. So that becomes the net debt. And in the last 12 months, we added another slight change to the way things are done with the agreement that we have with the airport company, where we are raising some money and on lending it to them. So in reality then, in the report, I'm showing at times the council's gross debt, less any investments that we have that relate to debt, less the sum that we've on lent to the airport company, to show the council's real sort of bottom line net debt position. So I guess I'm just explaining why at times there are those 2 or 3 different figures that are mentioned through here, because the gross debt at times is something that's important for us to measure, and it falls into some of the tests of our lenders, and at other times the net debt is the figure that's measured. So we started off the year with a budget for debt that assumed we would have 176 million outstanding. The reality was, when the start of the year happened, we had a little bit less than that, about 3 million less than that as our opening debt. Throughout the course of the year, the budget assumed originally that we'd raise about another $55 million of new debt to fund the capital program. And throughout the year, you made other decisions that would have meant that we raised another $14.5 million on top of that to fund some additional things, which meant that the budget assumed we would have ended up the year with a net debt of $245 million. The reality was we ended up the year with a net debt of $215 million relating to council, and that was primarily lower because of the lower capital that was done during the year. The capital work then was planned, and as well slightly higher cash, nearly $5 million worth of cash that was received from development contributions, for example, that was above what the budget had assumed, and that is used to pay off debt because that's the nature of the way in which we fund that capital program. So that's the debt levels. In terms of the interest cost, we'd assumed in the budget that we would have an interest cost during the year amounting to about $6.7 million. The actual net interest that we received during the year was about $500,000 more than that, and that was primarily due to the rapidly increasing interest rates that we faced, that went from a budget assumption of 3.4 to on average throughout the year about 4%. In terms of the council's risk position for debt, we have this policy that drives some of our actions in trying to fix debt or have debt floating, and that came into force in a really significant way during the year, because the fixed components through the hedging and the like saved us from, I suppose, even further interest rate costs than we would have incurred, as we're borrowing these days at over 6%. So the sums that we have fixed at those lower rates are protecting us at the moment from those movements to a degree. As at the 30th of June, nearly 70% of our debt was fixed in one way or another. Fixed either because it was borrowed fixed, or fixed because we had a debt instrument, a hedging instrument, that gave the same effect. The average cost in interest rates of those debts that were at the 30th of June was about 2.7%. So that, and had an average term of about 4 years. So that those hedging instruments will protect us at that sort of level for a period, and then they will progressively work out of the system, and we're trying to work to take opportunities when they arise to protect from even further increases. But the opportunities to buy hedging products that actually are useful at the moment are very slim, and we've got some orders in the market, but the rates are still much higher than what we're prepared to try to fix for any term at the minute. The last key thing that I just mentioned is that it's important to the council to retain its credit rating, and through the year the Standard & Poor's Global, S&P Global, they reassessed the council's rating and retained it at the level it had been at, which is a prime level for us. So all of the other tests that we have in terms of policy targets and the like through the year for the various aspects of the activity were all met as at the 30th of June. So that's me.
Thank you, Steve. A couple of questions before I go to my colleagues. Ultimately, we are repaying debt, aren't we? I mean, I always hear you saying we're taking on more debt, but ultimately we are repaying back in batches, aren't we?
Yes and no. As a council, we've got a profile of an increasing debt to fund the new capital programs that we've got. But our policy in terms of the Treasury policy and the strategy is to share the cost of that debt repayment over the life of the asset. So we're setting aside sums each year in terms of the rates we're setting with the aim of contributing towards debt repayment. So we are repaying, but refinancing some of that because, well, in the end, all of it, because the council's debt profile is an increasing one. It's just that we're paying off the bits relating to particular assets and then investing in new assets as part of the overall picture.
So, for instance, a piece of pipe that you know has an intergenerational sort of aspect to it, and it was done many years ago. We'll still be paying some of that off in this say this lifetime.
In theory, we're paying off debt up to a maximum of 30 years under the policy. So, yes, we shouldn't be paying off something that's super old in that respect.
Yeah, like a house mortgage. Okay. So in terms of the hedging, and we're now starting to see, I always used to wonder when I was sitting around this table about the swaps and the hedging. By gosh, thank goodness we've got it now. And we're averaging 4%, which I see in on page 17 looks pretty good. You spoke about 70% of our book being fixed. What is the timing of that? I.e., when do we have to re-look at things, or does that continue the entire time?
Well, we continually do that every month, really, reassess what we've got fixed, and as I tried to mention a little bit earlier, take opportunities to fix more. Right now, for instance, in terms of our policy about fixing, it goes over a period of 10 years and is based on our forecasts of what the debt's going to be over that time. And so that's where it gets a bit tricky, because we have some significant decisions to make about what the actual debt levels are going to be. But based on the past material we've got, altered a little bit for changing circumstances, we're managing the portfolio on the basis of those assessed debt levels. And as it turns out, right within the next month or so, we are going to breach marginally one of those things, because we won't have quite the level fixed in that year that the policy says we should. But together with our advisors, we're saying, well, it's just not appropriate to fix at the levels there are right now, and we've, as I said, got some standing orders out with institutions to let us know if they levels get to the ones that we believe are the appropriate ones to fix a bit longer.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask a question on page 16. In the first table there, Schedule 1. I see that in our annual budget for the year, we didn't budget debt repayments, but obviously we have made $25 million of debt repayments. So I just want to understand, I'm sure there's some technical mechanism as to why we don't budget it, but was 25 million what we were expected to pay in this period, or was that?
What we tend to show in the budget is at this high level just what the net position is, what we're proposing to raise net new. And yeah, we pay off $25 million in the end of old scheduled debt that was scheduled to be paid. It was just that we didn't show the budget that way.
So taking what you just said there, so if I added 47 and 25 together, that would be 2 million, and we were budgeting 54 million of new debt. So I'm just trying to understand what you said there as to how it relates to what we've actually got in front of us.
Sum that we borrowed net was 47 less 25.
Okay. All right. So in terms of how it tracks to budget, then we were budgeting a net new debt of 54, but we actually had a net new debt of around 22. All right, thank you. On the graph on the next page, page 17, it gives us a 10-year history of gross and net debt, and I can see over the 5-year period between 2018 and now we've doubled our debt. I just want to understand how that tracks historically. Have we got a 30-year graph that would be able to be provided to council? So we can, is it a historic precedent that we double our debt about every 5 years, or is that abnormal, normal?
Well, the council's debt profile's changed quite a lot. If you go back beyond that period that we've had there, we had quite high debt at one stage when the council bought an electricity entity, and then we had some funds subsequent to the sale of that. We had quite a lot of cash that was invested, so the net debt position was quite low. So the profile's changed quite a lot, but yes, there's been quite a lot of investment in new assets over that 4 or 5 year period, and that's contributed to the debt levels being what they are now, higher than what they used to be. But
thank you. And my final question was sort of following on from the mayor's around how we tag programs. So let's say this year we had 3 programs that we wanted to do, pipes, roading, whatever it may be, that totaled $5 million. You would go out and raise $5 million to pay for those programs. How would a councillor and an officer in 30 years' time know that that's been paid for? Is that tagged through the course of its life, or is it just amalgamated into the pool of debt that we have and refixed over a 30-year period? How do we know if the theory is translating into practice?
yes, we have had in our budgeting tool that we've used a way of tracking the programs and the, I guess, the debt requirements for each of those programs. And each year after the end of the year, we update that to be able to keep track of what's outstanding for each program, if you like, over the period. And we started doing that in that sort of structured way in about 2009. Yes, 2009. So it's quite a long period now of those things, and we've got a reasonable history of that, and we're just looking to how we're going to continue doing that with our new systems and processes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Steve. Just going to page 19, the first 3 bullet points there, that talks about Three Waters, and we'll be holding the responsibility for that through to the 30th of June 2026. With the continued investment needed, do we have any understanding of the implications for that in terms of our debt?
The continuing investment, I'm just not quite getting the gist of your...
With Nature Calls, we're obviously investing heavily into, or reasonably heavily into, we're having to lean into that at the moment. So have we done any modelling in terms of what that is likely to do with our debt?
Right now, not an updated version. We're just, as we bring together the material for the next 10-year plan, we're right in the stages at the moment of gathering updated data, and we'll then be able to be in a position to have a little bit more certainty about what the options are, and with and without the waters. We have a position, but it's not one that I'd sort of rely on giving you information that's useful at the moment. I guess what I think in the council's original 10-year plan, there was assumptions that we'd be spending quite significant sums on the Nature Calls program by about now, just heading into that, and we're not anywhere near that right at the minute. So some of those commitments are going to be later than we originally assumed, and so they're not really hitting us right now, but whether they will be incurred at all before, as things are programmed at the moment, before the transfer in October 25, I don't know. But that's something that we'll be looking at as we program our material through the next few months.
Yeah, but we may not necessarily be investing heavily right at this minute, but we've actually got another 2 years to run. So do we actually understand what that curve looks like at this point in time?
Not right this very instant, no. We've in the process of bringing that material together in a form that will inform us and then you over the period between now and Christmas, basically.
Can we, Mr Mayor, can we just perhaps just get an indication of how that's going to be reported to councillors, please?
Well, we're bringing together, we're doing draft budgets through the whole council as part of the 10-year plan preparation, and we're right at the early phases of peer reviewing that right now, and there is a program to be coming to you with various updates on the progress with that between now and Christmas at workshops and further reports to committee.
I'll just ask the CE to make further comment.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. Three Waters and this need to be included in our long-term plans for the next foreseeable future. At this stage, under current legislation, we have there's a go-live date for a new entity to be stood up by 1 October 2025. And so our plans will be, at this stage, looking to be aligned to those sorts of dates, including when debt transfers and all of those sorts of things. There are already a number of conversations that have been held about how debt will be managed during that period up until this point under the current legislation that has been passed. However, if life changes after October, there are Plan B, C, D and E that we're currently looking at as well to see how Three Waters in particular will be managed on our books. You'll also recall, councillors, that you received a paper about funding and financing mechanisms as well for Three Waters. So all of those things come into the mix about how waters might be funded, managed on our books, off our books, across the course of leading into the LTP.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When you did your commentary, Steve, you mentioned that council had borrowed some and then invested a portion, and I wanted to inquire a little bit further about that. If you can recall the point that I'm referring to, the size of the amount that we draw down and then invest, and the difference of the interest rates between the borrowing and the investment.
As at the 30th of June, we didn't actually have anything in that category. Subsequent to the 30th of June, we have borrowed some in that category, and the sorts of sums that we've got is about 20 million we borrowed last month. Well, actually, yes, it was last month, August, and that sum is invested, and right now we are getting a positive return on that between the investing and the borrowing. It's not a desired, we're not striving for that, we're striving to cover the cost, but it just happens that right now we are doing that, and provided interest rates on the borrowing, which is floating, don't go up significantly between now and April, when the debt that we're looking to fund matures, then we'll be either break even or positive on that.
Okay, is that a regular
Yes.
operating practice to do that?
It is now. Over the last 2 or 3 years we've been doing that. As I mentioned, I think during the commentary, it's the thing, one of the things that our credit agencies look to is the test of liquidity, if you like, and so the liquidity test is really assuring them that there will be funds available to repay debt when it matures. And so one way of actually proving that is to borrow in advance. And so with our advisors, we're progressively all the time looking to when the next sums are that are going to mature, and perhaps taking about a 12-month outlook. So the ones that we've borrowed at the moment are due to mature in April, that 20-odd million.
Can I just inquire, because it wouldn't be always the case, I'd imagine, that we'd have a positive outcome on that borrowing rate versus an investment rate. In those situations, would we not advance the drawdown and look at a credit facility that would give us that flexibility otherwise?
It's one of the things we take into account occasionally is better to be able to be sure that the funds are available and take a small cost of doing that. It's one sort of an insurance mechanism, if you like, to make sure that those funds are available. So I would be willing to pay, for the council to pay a small sum, but we're always looking to the most appropriate time to borrow with the eye to what we can get on the investment side as well.
And can I just understand, is that part of the policy?
Yes.
Council approved policy to allow for that?
It is.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Steve. And just to follow on from Councillor Dennison's question, have I got it right that the liquidity test you're referring to allows the council to go into further debt to pay off a debt in the future?
Yes, as I mentioned in response to one of the Mayor's questions, we have a profile for debt that is an increasing profile. In other words, the council's debt level is increasing. So for that reason, it's going to be the case that whenever debt matures, a particular issue, and we have to repay it, we're going to have to borrow again to be able to fund that, because we don't have the cash to be able to pay it off. And so from that perspective, we are always in the position really of needing to assure ourselves that we're capable of borrowing at that time.
Sorry, just to follow on, it's probably just for my own benefit. Apologies, councillors. Steve, could you just clarify for me what liquidity means?
Liquidity means sort of cash in the hand, really, an ability to pay when required. So from our perspective, in terms of proving our liquid position, our capacity, our ability to borrow and have funds available, we do two or three things. We have a high credit rating. That means that the market is willing to lend. We have credit lines with the bank so that if we have an unexpected requirement, we can go out and get that money because the line of credit is there. So that is a test. And if it comes to this latest one, is really being able to have the funds on hand, sitting on deposit, to prove that you can pay at the time that the debt matures.
All right, thank you, Steve. So look, we have our Treasury report recommendation there around Council, noting the performance of Council's Treasury activity for the year 30 June 2023. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any comments. Look, thank you, Steve, for preparing that. I sometimes look around the room and the eyes glaze over when we talk about these numbers, and there always was a little bit of black art of hedging and swaps, but and we've debated that over the years, but it actually has come to our fruition now where it's actually working for us positively, and when higher interest rates are in place, and to have an average interest rate of 4%, I think is well worked. So thank you for that. We've got $215 million of total gross debt, excluding the airport. But it sounds a lot, and we've done a lot. When you think about the infrastructure that we've put in, whether that be waters, pipes, roads, pump stations, pathways, community centres, there's been a lot of earthquake strengthening. There's been a lot go on in quite a short period of time. And that's the very reason that the debt has doubled, and it does go in cycles, as Steve, when one of the questions was about asking why the debt had risen, it's because stuff actually happens in lumpy bits, and we've got another lump to come as well when you talk about the Nature Calls project and keeping ahead of the curve with some of the earthquake strengthening as well. But do remember, that's on a significantly improved balance sheet as well, and we're getting the upside of that. So it's increasing all the time, and it'd be in the realm of 2.6 billion, so we have to take that into consideration as well. So absolutely need to have our hands and eyes and ears all over this, because it is quite important that we set the strategy right for Steve to then and his team to go away and engage in the work of the Treasury side of council, which is the funding and financing side. So very happy to move this. Thanks, Steve. Still some heavy lifting to go as we enter quite a challenging period. All right, nobody else wishing to speak? We'll vote, please. It's passed, 14 votes for and none against. All right, we'll move to number 10 on our papers, and that's the quarterly performance and financial report for the period ending 30 June 2023. And I'll ask that Scott Manser, who's our finance manager, come and present that, please. And friends. Sorry, I wasn't aware there was a lot of you. Welcome Sue Kelly, who's the Project Management Office, Andrew Boyle, who's our community head of Community Planning.
Morning, Mr Mayor and Councillors. The 12-month performance report for the period ending 30th of June is in the agenda, and I'll take that largely as read. I do want to talk to a couple of points though before I pass over to Sue and Andrew for some further commentary. So first up, we finished the year with a $1.2 million surplus. That is a very, very good year considering some of the inflationary pressures and the rising interest rates that Steve has just spoken about. Taking into account the intended carry forwards for the digital programs, with the exception of net interest that Steve's also alluded to, we've actually balanced the budget for the year, which at one point was looking rather difficult to do, but has been a really, really good result from the organisation. I need to highlight capital without stealing too much of Sue's thunder. It's our best year on record at 75.9 million for the year. So there's a really, really good year from that team, and lots of things have been put in place there. And I'd also like to highlight a slight increase in the carry forwards that were predicted as part of the annual budget. So they've risen by around 3 million between adopting the budgets and finalising the year end, and mostly due to timing of when work's being done by our suppliers and contractors of goods arriving, particularly from international sources and contractor availability. A very, very good result for the organisation for the 12 months. So I'll pass over to Sue to talk about the capital report.
Thank you. Just a light touch from me. A really good result from our perspective for the capital report. Doesn't mean to say there isn't continued room for improvement, but particularly the second half of the year reflected great momentum, reflected the work that had been done really around improving project delivery process, improved project governance, and a lot of work pulled together by the entire infrastructure team. We're obviously working on keeping that improvement going, keeping the momentum going, and look forward to hoping that this year will reflect that continued work. We are in the process of putting in a new project management tool, and that will enable us to have, again, improved governance and better reporting. One of the things on the topic of reporting, that just a couple of comments around the figures that you have, that 67% completion rate doesn't take into account either way around projects that we knew were never intended to be completed. And so that's something, as we improve how we can tell or give improved visibility into what's happening, we can start to highlight that sort of thing. Things like the animal shelter that were truly multi-year projects, we need to be able to demonstrate that better. The other thing from the point of view of the capital new work, again, how we report it doesn't necessarily show accurately the whole story. For example, we had about 7 million that was taken out of that as a result of various decisions along the way, not within infrastructure. So if we then looked at that and said what was the spending percentage for the original Capital New, it was actually 80%. So again, we're not quite showing the story as accurately as we can, and we'll be working to improve that. But those are actually good news stories. That was, better than perhaps the figures are showing. And the other thing, just noting that we have got better processes around managing, identifying and predicting carry forwards, and I think that really showed through this year. So that was it from me.
Hello councillors, Andrew Boyle, Head of Community Planning. My part of the report is the traffic lights from page 48 onwards. And I just have to point out that on Monday we noticed an error in there. The CCI patronage should have been green and not red. And we should have also put in there the pre-COVID figures. So figures have increased from COVID from last year, but also pre-COVID. Thank you, and sorry.
Happy to take any questions that there may be.
Great, thanks. There are a number. I'll start. First of all, well done on the financial performance and the balancing of the books and that capital new improvement. That's good to hear, and understand there's some improvements more on your side, Sue. But can I ask, are we still holding, contractors and to account on timeframes? And I take the one which probably every councillor gets asked about is that Ring Road, Ferguson, Pitt Street. And I see in a report that somebody put out that it was going to be completed at the end of August. And I think that's well and truly gone. So are you managing that? Who's managing that?
That has been managed through the PMO, yes. We are increasingly working with our contractors to improve the way in which we manage and deliver contracts of work. We had a meeting with them just yesterday, looking at that and looking at ways in which we would reflect how well they've excuse me, delivered contracts into what we're seeing and lessons learned and how we manage that within the procurement process. So absolutely, it's an ongoing piece of work and we're improving all the time.
So, I've seen the bit of work as every other councillor probably has, and it's looking good. But how has it taken, it hasn't blown out a little bit. I don't know, is it a year over? I don't know, it's 9 months or something over. How's it gone so bad? Is it just we were throwing a whole lot of stuff we just didn't know about?
Perhaps we'll refer that up to Hamish, GM for Transport.
Good morning, councillors. In summary, this project has been a bit of a learning curve in a couple of different ways. The pre-work, the design work that was done didn't take into account that there was some pretty awful blue clay in there, so that has added a bit of time during the construction period. The reason that keeps sort of getting delayed out is often is actually due to the weather. So every time we have a little bit of water on there, we have to leave it 3 or 4 days to dry out. So it just keeps getting pushed out, and actually constructing during winter is a very risky business for roads at the best of times. So I think they've actually done reasonably well considering that.
Okay, no, that's cool. Just I get asked it almost every week, so
I can understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Hamish. Okay, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask a couple of questions to start with around the capital delivery. Firstly, congratulations, it's great to see, but whenever we discuss operational budgets, we say if we don't put an extra X% in line with inflation, we're not actually increasing it, we're falling behind. In the capital delivery space, costs have inflated around, to my understanding, the 30% mark, so to be delivering the same that we delivered 2 years ago, we'd need to be spending 30% more. And so I appreciate through a spending lens, we've delivered the most we've ever achieved, but in terms of indexation to inflation, how are we tracking against previous years? in terms of actual real delivery, if you want to call it that.
That's a very difficult question to answer.
Fair enough.
Especially with the way, obviously, inflation's been through the roof this year, comparatively speaking to the last couple. I'd probably take reference to the increase in the percentage of project completion. That would probably be our best measure that we could provide sort of here and now. 67% this year in comparison with 35% in the previous financial year and 54% in the previous year before that. So there's a significant increase across either of those 2 years, and that's probably the best way to have a look at that.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. On page 49, so this might be your territory, Andrew, it talks about the first measure of city growth, and it says industrial zone plan changes scheduled for 2024/25. There's not a lot of mention in the lead up to it it talks about a number of long-term plan programs for rezoning and providing additional space. I recall in the annual budget debates, we provided an additional $100,000 to accelerate that delivery, and this is the only mention I see of it in here. I was just wondering if we get a comment on how we're tracking with that, given the additional budget that we provided to accelerate it.
So through you, Mr. Chair, David Murphy, Chief Planning Officer. So last financial year, the challenge was the dollars available to sort of bring in technical experts to help drive the plan change. So having that extra money this year is making a difference. What I would say is scaling up that work and accelerating it is a challenge in terms of getting the consultants on board. Also developing the capacity and capability of our own team, which is, to be honest, going through a rebuilding phase. So that said, we are making good progress. All the evidence is being prepared for the Ekautari plan change, which is scheduled for December. Medium density residential standards plan change is all but ready. We're waiting on the final stormwater assessment. Roxburgh, I had a conversation yesterday with the team about taking some risks to accelerate that project. So in terms of your specific question, I guess around the industrial plan change, so the Te Uu Tanganui master plan, the next step is to look for engagement around that process, and there is LTP budgets being prepared to specifically address the implementation of those industrial zone plan changes. So what I would say is as I said, the additional funding has been great in terms of accelerating the work. It won't be a one-year fix. The LTP will include programs for those specific growth works because growth programs, we won't be able to rezone 8,000 homes in a year. So it's going to be a long-term process.
Fair enough. Thank you, David. And my final question was on page 53 regarding performance measures. When we talk about building confidence in the community and that council's making good decisions and all of that, there's a comment in here that said, as a part of the cost-cutting measures for the 2023 annual budget. I just want to understand why we've framed it that way, given what we did was increase budgets by smaller amounts rather than cost-cutting. I just want to understand why we decided to frame what we did at the annual budget as cost-cutting. It's about 6 lines down, and the comment on performance measure 2 on page 53.
I think the key point there is that we have reduced looks like we've reduced the media monitoring service.
Sorry, Olivia Wicks, Comms Manager. When we were asked to look at potential savings, we identified that media monitoring could be a saving for the organisation. Currently, I think we've talked about it in other quarterly reports. They've changed the algorithms significantly, which means we're getting very little actual sentiment analysis, and they've also, I guess a lot of our media that really matters locally for us is our local media, so our local radio stations, our local media, and they don't pick up like our local radio stations. They don't pick up a lot of our other media. So for me, that was something that I think that we could put forward, and we also have a relatively good sentiment of what our media is, just from us all being local in the community too. So it was one thing that we identified that we could reduce some savings to help with that annual budget rate. Yeah.
I really appreciate that answer, and I guess the question I was asking was a bit political because you've described it as savings rather than cost cutting, but the report described it as cost cutting, so it was, I guess, just a general question around why it was framed that way. But anyway, appreciate your comments.
We need more Spanish stories, Liv.
I think I'm too tired for that, thanks.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Questions around staffing on page 46 under resourcing. I see that we're still carrying a very high level of vacancies. And my question is that deliberate, or what are the factors that are leading to us carrying, you know, what is, I don't know,
I'll get
nearly a
CE
20%
to
vacancy
answer
rate?
that.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is deliberate. So we are needing to make sure that we live within our means currently as well. And budgets and programs are set that match our current resources that we have in the place.
So it's in response to the annual budget that was set, and it's a means of managing cost?
Yes.
And what are the consequences of carrying that level of vacancies in terms of service delivery, staff morale, stuff like that?
Through the chair, I may take that on notice and then actually need to come back in a more fuller response around that. At the moment, our intention is to ensure that levels of service are not impacted, and I don't believe that they are. I think that actually in the quarterly report, it's demonstrating that we've lived quite well within our means and delivered on projects, and Capital Works program is humming along a little bit better than perhaps it has even in the past. So I'm okay where we're currently at the moment, but perhaps to provide a more fuller response, I'll need to come back to you.
Okay, I'll await that. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. My question just relates to page 67. It's under the water activity, and that we are now 90% compliant in terms of the new bacteria rules. That's it, and we've got 2 quarters where we're in red. Well, significant capital upgrades are required to achieve 100% compliance. These are scheduled in the LTP over the next several years, and a full report is going to council in September. I don't actually see that in the work schedule, so I'm just wondering how that's going to be reported to us, please.
I'll follow up and come back to you about that. Mike's not here just at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sue, Scott and Andrew, and the CE and others for the comprehensive report. And look, we've got a couple of recommendations there. The council receives the memorandum titled Quarterly Performance and Financial Report for the period ended 30 June 2023 and related attachments presented on the 6th of September 2023. Number 2, the council approved the adjustments to carry forward values and for the carry forward report attachment. Number 3, that the Chief Executive be given delegation to allocate 100% of the funds from the Low Carbon Fund, Program 1888, to other activities, as well as removing the fund between Capital New and Capital Renewal for the financial year 23-24. I'm happy to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If I could just say thank you to the officers, well done. On the Financial Performance and Balancing Act, and it is always a balance. It wasn't looking that good a little while ago, so you've done incredibly well to continue the level of service, keep the BAU going, and it is damn hard out there at the moment. We just had a Te Tanganui governance meeting and talking to a lot of our national external partners, and it's a difficult time for New Zealand right at the moment. So well done. To achieve the capital program, and I was one of the leaders and quite critical on where we were going. So again, thank you for, there was a lot of dissatisfaction and you've gone a long way to addressing it. So kudos where it's due, well done. And look, I understand there's improvements around project management, but I'd say there still is some way to go in that. It's certainly from an external point of view. It'll stop the resident inquiries and I wouldn't say all complaints, but inquiries to our office. And I appreciate there was so much work on that particular project that I spoke about around the Inner Ring Road. But look, looking forward to that being completed, and it looks like it's been completed to a very high standard, so that's great. I'll take everything else as being well read and very well done, so I appreciate everything. I'll open it up for commentary. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I'd certainly add my voice to yours around the capital completion, which is really pleasing to see. And I think perhaps we feared it couldn't be done at one point, but there's been substantial improvement, and I think goes to the level of planning and project management that's been put in. So that's a big positive and really pleasing to see. I'm just going to talk about concern I have around the level of staff vacancies that we're carrying. So I understand that this is a means of managing cost, but it does add substantially to pressure on staff and can affect morale. And I do note that we still have a high turnover rate, as reported the other week to committee. So I am concerned about us carrying a large vacancy rate, which by my calculation is about 14% vacancy rate, deliberately. And whilst certainly the Chief Executive is correct to point to the capital completion, there are a number of operational programmes that are not meeting the KPIs, and a number of reports and contracts that are not being monitored in the way that we have expected them to be monitored, one of which was the roading contract, which came up last week, I believe. And on inquiry, there are significant vacancies in a number of key departments. And whilst some of that may be due to, the labour force shortages, particularly in specialised areas that we have, I am concerned that maintaining a high vacancy rate as a strategy is not contributing to good service delivery for consumers and ratepayers. And I think when you look at the ratepayer satisfaction survey and see that that is going down, we do need to be aware that response times, delays, staff under pressure will all lead to negative experiences for customers. So I'll await the further report from the CE, but I'm flagging it now as an area of concern. And also, councillors, when we're thinking about budgets and expecting the CE to come back with cut after cut after cut, the consequence is things like this, that in order to achieve a balanced budget at the end of the year, we've had to carry 100 vacancies. And out of the staff that we have, that's a large number. So that often seems to go out of people's minds when they're proposing cuts at budget time. I'd like you to keep it in mind for now. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to comment? Okay, I just might, I wasn't going to, but I will, and because I've probably been a bit closer to it than others. Actually, our staff vacancy actually has improved and has gone the opposite, councillor. It was 22%. It's now tracking towards low 18%. And look, much of this has been inherited, to be really fair. I think it's a little bit unfair to make comments that it's out of control. You just need to look at the New Zealand Defence Force that's running at the high 20s in attrition and rates. A lot of these positions were positions that were never filled. They were a role and they were never filled. So I think we've got to take a a glass half full approach to this around that. Is the culture in the place better? Absolutely it is. So are we missing deadlines? I mean, we're missing deadlines because some people around the table want them quicker. We've got to be careful, and I think the CE has at times said, don't keep putting more and more on top of the pile, because there is trouble with meeting some of those elected member-driven deadlines. So I want to take a little bit more of a balanced approach to it. I don't think we've got a critical staffing issue here now. We did have. I think we've absolutely turned the corner there. So I'm going to be defending some of the staffing comments there. So no further comments. We'll vote, please. That's passed, 14 votes for and none against. Right, we'll move through to number 11, which is options to address issues raised in the 2022 annual resident survey, and invite Jess Papple, our marketing manager, and Andrew Boyle, our head of community planning, back to the table. It's on page 103 of your papers, councillors.
Morning, councillors. One thing that we just wanted to add into the table at the back of our report was that there is a new customer experience working group that has been established. It's only really early days, but it could have been something that was part of this. It's been led by Kirli, so that's still a work in progress, but yeah, Kirli, if you could help answer any questions about that, that'd be great. Thank you. Otherwise, we'll take it as read.
Sorry, that was so quick, I missed that. Andrew, do you have anything to add? Okay. All right, I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask a question on page 105, table 1. The second point you make is that elected members might start a program attending schools to discuss what council does, what the annual budget is, something which is excellent to see. This is the first I've heard of it. Just want to understand the next step. It says details to be discussed with elected members. When should we expect to hear those details being discussed with us?
I think it's understanding how you want to do it as well. Like, is there certain schools that you'd like to work with? Is there certain areas that you'd like to discuss, or is it overarching? And I think that would kind of be a bit of a plan with Hannah and myself to understand what that looks like and kind of what we're giving to students, and yeah, developing more of a plan around that. But that would be Hannah and I can work on that and get back to you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Completely agree. So I just want to know when. Will we have a workshop on it, or will it just be an informal discussion? Because this is awesome, and it would be great to have something up and running for the next year. But if we don't have a workshop for another 6 to 12 months, then it'll be a different story.
Understanding what we currently have, and then maybe it's an informal discussion if councillors are okay with that, to discuss what we think could be an option, and we can send some information out to elected members on that.
Right, so expect to hear something soon.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So just on that, Jess, you're aware that the Deputy Mayor and myself do quite a lot with schools. In fact, I think between us we did about 6 or 7 last week. Schools and students, so they're not all, some of them are young, I'd call young adults, but I'm about to go into the probus and rebus and all of the oldies. And again, I think it's important that we just not only focus on schools, but don't forget others as well.
100%. It's important to start with the young kids, because then you can get them encouraged into civics education so young.
I totally agree,
Yeah.
but often we do miss the actual people that aren't voting anyway. So, you know, it's working with the ones that absolutely should be. Have we looked at, so Parliament do a very good general guide about democracy, and you know, you go to Parliament buildings and there's a little bit of a tour. They've got a very, very good little guide. Have you got all that material?
I don't on hand, but I can definitely look into it and see how we can adapt or borrow some content.
I think there's some. I have got it, and I'm quite happy to share it with you. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Jess and Andrew. Couple questions for me on page 107. You mentioned that officers have identified other opportunities that could raise their profile and understanding of the council, but this may require additional funding or budget, which could be addressed in the long-term plan. How does this relate to the motion that was referred to the long-term plan for civics education? Is it? Just want to get an understanding around it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor McCallum, I'm unsure which motion you're referring
I'm sorry,
to.
a recommendation was, after the election, a recommendation was referred to long-term plan to sort of come up with a report with options to see how we can sort of engage the community have programs for civics education. I'm not sure whether this also is part of it.
Are we talking about the previous annual budget?
No, long-term plan.
Into the current long-term plan, we'll make sure it comes through.
Cool. I have another question as well. So you've on the same page 107. You talked about also sharing stories of columns from elected members, and I've noticed that you've on the council's social media you've only posted them as stories, not as posts. Is it deliberate, or because I thought that was also to encourage, not only to raise elected member profile, but also to encourage sort of engagement as well on the.
So our stories have the highest level of engagement. So we put you where the best viewing is actually, and that is the best viewing platform for the younger demographic as well. So it's actually playing into the audience that isn't quite engaging with council, and that's why it was put there. And again, I know that Liv's working on a pilot to understand like where the best kind of algorithms are, and because we want to get the best viewership for you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Just on that as well, in your own personal, expert opinion, would you also, do you see value in also putting them as posts in order to generate engagement with the community? Or?
Personally, I think that stories are really great at targeting my demographic, and I think if that is the audience that is currently not engaging with council and doesn't understand what council does, I think that is the best place for them to be. Because that really is the issue with the resident surveys, that is the demographic that doesn't quite understand what we do.
Right. On page 107, around opportunities included, point 3, you said introduction of qualitative focus group, typically around 20 and 40 people, and pulse surveys. Can you please just elaborate on what that looks like?
So, do you want to take this? So the resident survey is one form of surveying, clearly, but the idea is that we're putting a lot of emphasis on one survey where we may not be getting all of, we will be getting all of the people's views, but actually getting that direct conversations with people is actually how you get the really important and great information out of actually working with people, understanding what is the intent behind scoring us lower in one area or higher in another, because it could be that they've had a negative interaction about Featherston or Cuba Street, but overall they're actually really satisfied. So putting context behind scores, anything like that.
Cool. And also working with schools to develop civics program. I also come in with the comments that, the questions that were raised by the mayor. In your view, is it, I understand that we're trying to get schools, but is there also scope to also include other members of the public to also get an understanding what civics, around civics and that sort of, because yes, it's true, schools do need them, and all elected members should be able to attend them, not just probably the mayor or the deputy mayor, but in your own professional view, do you think that this net could be cast wider to other members of the community who probably will not see council as sort of like cup of tea and that sort of thing, to try to sort of get them to engage and get them to understand what council actually does? Because it's not a comment, Mr. Chair, but having been in the community and hearing what other members of the community are saying. There seems to be sometimes a fusion of what council does and what central government does, and the community doesn't really understand that. So,
Sorry, councillor, that is very much a comment.
yeah.
So what's the question?
The question is there an opportunity for us to cast the net a bit wider to include other members of the community that are just not school students? Yeah.
So yes, Hannah has just nodded and said yes, that is part of it. But I would say to you that I think that's where that education and promotion comes in, and actually giving people physical information as to what we do, and also kind of giving them the ability to upskill in what we do. So there's that two parts to it as well.
No, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Jess, and thanks, Andrew. A couple questions. I'd start off, I guess, focusing on what I'd see as some of the more maybe fundamental issues in that, like the decline in trust. I'll use that as an example. Do we feel like we really understand the problem?
I think that's where that addition of focus groups comes in, and actually doing some more in-depth research with people to understand what is their issue with trust, like what is their concern around trust in council. Because if it is one thing that could easily be fixed, what is that one thing? And that's why that has been a recommendation to put that up for the LTP.
And would those focus groups also be an opportunity for identifying what kind of solutions might actually have efficacy?
100%, yes. Yeah.
Can I understand, given that it's 12 months since this was identified, kind of why it's only now that we're having this conversation about potentially having focus groups, and why we didn't perhaps activate some of that sooner?
I think the LTP is a good opportunity to put forward the budget to you that would enable us to do the focus groups.
So the officer's advice is to let kind of low trust levels languish for 12 to 18 months before acting?
No, but it wasn't particularly raised by elected members back as part of the annual budget, in my recall. So we've had a look at it since then, and I guess it's not so much the LTP, but this budget, we put a budget in, the draft budget in the proposed plan to enable focus groups.
Thank you. Second area of questions I have is just around, are there any cases in what you can already see in the survey beyond kind of the roading space, where our responses might need to go beyond kind of comms and marketing?
That will feed into the content that is based on the what does council do kind of umbrella. So we will identify areas that have the lower performance, I suppose is the wording I want, and then make that the content focus. But realistically, the biggest issue in my mind for this report is the understanding of what council does, because that will affect people therefore trusting in that we can deliver in these services, if that makes sense.
And I think some of the enforcement services quite obviously have a lower level of satisfaction, but I think there is a big gap between how people perceive council services and how people perceive the council. And I think that is somewhere that needs to be, as Jesse said, we need to tie the reputation of council to making people realise what it is that actually council does.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at, Mr. Chair, is really the extent to which we're seeking to simply change the perception around business as usual versus actually going in and revisiting how and what we do as council in some cases. And it seems to me, on reading this report, that it's quite a bit about perception changing rather than fundamental changing underneath. Would that be a fair comment?
No, I think it's both, because all of the activity managers and the service managers get the survey and look at it as part of their management of their area. But I do think there is, that the big difference between when we ask people what they think of council services, particularly the waters and the parks and the libraries and Te Manawa, there's just such a big gap between those and how people perceive the council. So there's such an opportunity for us there to remind people that it is the council that provides those good services, and so that when they think about the council, they think about the services a bit more readily. And it's just their thoughts on the services are positive. They're not false perceptions. We're just trying to get some of the credit for them back to the wider organisation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and thanks, Jess and Andrew. My question is a fairly quick one, and it just relates to Palmy Proud. We cut that back, I think, through one of the budgets, and then on page 107, you talk about a targeted newsletter every 4 months, and you use our Auckland as an example. Can you give me a better understanding of how that might look and how that would be different to Palmy Proud?
So previously, before Palmy Proud was established, we had the Page and Square Circular. So the Page was run by, I believe it was Destination Manawatu, and Square Circular was run in-house, I believe. And the differences in the audiences. So Palmy Proud is specifically to change the perceptions of Palmerston North and to showcase the amazing things that we have to offer. Whereas the newsletter would be targeted about council activities and actually encouraging people to understand what's happening with consultations, what's happening with roadworks, what's happening with the things in our city, so that they have specific audiences is probably, the answer to that.
And the means of distribution of that?
So Palmy Proud has a high distribution rate within Palmerston North and around Palmerston North and key fly zones, so that's more strict, whereas the newsletter would be for residents. And my understanding is that it is going to households. I'm just going to check with the comms manager. Yes.
Thank you, that's very helpful, Mr. Chair.
Just on that, Jess, aren't we talking two different products? One's more of a campaign tourism product, which is Palmy Proud, and unfortunately for elected members and those who were in the room when it was done, it was a MSL decision that was done. And I mean, it's been a great product, don't get me wrong, but there has been a real gap, and there's an element of residents really not knowing who the elected members are, because the Square Circular, what you spoke about,
Yeah, it's definitely a difference in publications purposes and what they're both trying to achieve.
Yep. I realised that was straying into a comment. I could sense it as I was saying it, sorry. So just on that, where are we at with producing a targeted, more perhaps resident-centric, these are the things council's doing newsletter?
So I might throw to our comms manager, if that's okay, through you, Mr. Chair, as it will be run.
Morning. This is my baby, the idea that I'd be quite keen on seeing what kind of success it can have, because I think part of what we've done is we've essentially tapped out every free ability to communicate with our residents. Now, we've significantly increased our letters, we're working with schools, we're getting a bunch of free interviews on the radio every week, so this is, I guess, kind of the last option that really is there for us. About half of councils have got a residents newsletter, and they do it in a variety of different ways. So one of the things I've been doing over the last 6 weeks or so as part of our LTP programs is talking to other councils about what they do, why they do it, and how they do it. So I guess for context, some councils will put it into a newspaper as like a pull-out. One of the concerns that I guess we would raise that probably wouldn't work for us is our distribution within the city wouldn't hit all of our suburbs. So quite a few big suburbs don't get access to, say, The Guardian. We also obviously have Bunnythorpe. Not everyone has letterboxes, so there's some things there. We've looked and talked to some councils who only rely on email, and they have very, very poor results. And then we've also looked about, is it something that could go into just the rates? And we would not advise that because we want to change the perception and give people greater understanding for everyone, regardless of whether they're a ratepayer or a resident. So I guess where we're at is in the LTP programs and we also asked some councils about their regularity, and a lot of them did do 4 times a year, but have all moved towards this 3 times a year. And so the time frames that I guess if we were to do it, I would propose would be one just prior to the Christmas season, so recapping a lot of the big stuff that had happened in the year, also highlighting the big event season. Then I'd probably look at doing one around March, around the time that we would do an annual budget consultation, so to really raise the awareness of that, and then do another one probably in July or August. So those key kind of points where there are really strong decision-making points in the year as well. But yeah, so we were proposing that it would be something that would go out to all homes. Businesses are a bit trickier because the way that the delivery works is if you're a business but you're in a multi-storey property, we don't have access to those property details. So we'd probably look at getting it out to houses, but also utilising our libraries, our customer service centre, the Chamber of Commerce, and distributing it in different ways, like via that. So yeah, it's an option there.
So Liv, can I just ask you, I mean, you just said no to rates and using that free mechanism of our ratepayers getting it. Why wouldn't you look at a hybrid where it does go out to the ratepayers, it does go to the public, and we use some of our partners like iwi, Health, Defence, the Bid, Chamber, and keep the costs sort of realistic? Otherwise, I can just see this being a big bill coming at us.
I think if we don't deliver something to homes, that's where it becomes quite hard. So like Palmy
Rates
Proud.
go to homes.
Oh yes, but we do have requirements on how much paper we can put in an envelope for rates, which sounds silly, but it's one of the big requirements.
Requirements from who?
From the postal service about how thick an envelope can be.
Yeah, you have got room to do stuff there.
We can investigate that more. I guess a lot of and it's hard because I guess with the resident survey, we don't ask them to identify who's a ratepayer and who's a resident. But
that's why I suggested hybrid.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. That's handy.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. You might need to stay there. My questions. I'm trying not to repeat questions of the past. I think my questions are mostly about awareness of the role of elected members and some of the particular options given as new and maybe ongoing in table 1. So first, does council do promotional campaign? But that seems to exclude the role of elected members in what does council do? Is there scope there to include elected members in that?
I definitely think that we should be putting that in, including as to how council works. I think that's a really key point in terms of how decisions are made and really so people can understand, the process that you will go through to make these big calls for the city. So yeah, absolutely, they can be a part of the scope for that work. And potentially it's a topic of content as well. And I go back to that content buckets because I think it's focusing on why you do the things that you do. So yeah, absolutely.
Is that something you can just pick up, or do we need to include that specifically?
No, that's fine. Easy.
Great. The second one about elected members could attend schools. I think, as the Mayor alluded to, many of us have been doing that for many, many years. And so that triggered a question for me about how have you sought information about what elected members are already doing to raise awareness of their role, and how is that reflected here?
I think that's possibly an oversight where we should have written could continue to. Sorry, that's an oversight on our behalf. Whereas maybe that's talking about when you go out to schools, that's a way for us to promote that in terms of could that be where we come and get some stories for you guys being out and about, all that kind of things. Potentially that's, if you are doing those things, how do we find that information out to come and support you as well? That would be maybe we can work with Hannah on that to understand the timings for those engagements.
I might hesitate. This might turn into comment, but I think that just shows the lack of understanding of the massive amount of activity that elected members do. And
just think it's finding time when you're going so we can come with you to do some promotional work around it. I think that's probably when.
I'll leave that one for comment. The next one I had a question about was you talked about having a tent base, for example, the Esplanade. Again, this is something we've tried many times over the years. How has that feedback been fed into this?
So I think that's where it's changed slightly, where it's officers forward and elected members support. That was because we don't want to get into the situation where we aren't supporting you as well. So that's the changes where officers will be there. So it's certain, like especially for the LTP, our plan is to I think it's actually Liv and I and a few others, to be at these events and engaging with the public, and that's the opportunity for you to be a part of that as well, like when you can and where you can, yeah.
And I suppose that leads into a bigger question of how do we evaluate the success of any of these approaches, noting that these are cumulative over many years. Lots of these things we've been doing for a long time. Some of them just don't work. So how does that evaluation for a stop-go decision happen, and when will that come back to elected members?
I think that's potentially some conversations that we'd have with you in terms of, you've been doing this for many years, what do you perceive to be the best options for engaging with the community and understanding their needs? The LTP gives us a really great chance to be out in the public and actually working with people, which is really exciting. It's one of my favourite parts of my job, and so actually being out and about is a really great way to be seen as well, because of that, obviously that physical reminder of that we exist and council is this big entity behind them.
Thank you. I think the community looks forward to that physical reminder that I exist.
Absolutely.
No further questions, Mr. Mayor.
I'll just ask the CE to comment.
Yeah, just following the conversation, councillors, is that this paper's come to you as a result of, I think it was Councillor Barrett put the notice of motion or the resolution up last time, and it was specifically in relation to the resident satisfaction survey. How effective we've been will no doubt come out in future resident satisfaction surveys as well in some regard. But it was more pointed at the engagement that council was having with the community and how more involved you could all be in communications and events and those sorts of things. So although the team have presented a number of options in a table here, this is, in my view, in addition to what we're potentially already currently doing and continuing to work on. So nothing's, in my view, is actually off the table. We should be looking at a whole raft of options that might be available, including the things that you've actually talked about today as well. We can run pulse surveys and things like that in between to kind of get a bit of measure about how things or how effective things have been doing, and you'll see some stats coming through in social media and how many people are we connecting with and those sorts of things. But the important part is how engaged council is with its community and how people get involved in the decision-making process was probably a key part, if I recall, from the notice of motion that went up the first time.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really just picking up on Councillor Bowen's line of questioning there, really is just to clarify, was it the officer's view that in terms of, say for example, engaging with schools, is that there is an opportunity for us to actually work together to be a little bit more prescriptive about the messaging that we provide to all of the groups that elected members actually do engage with anyway, plus some?
Are you talking about content with that we provide to the group?
Yeah, I guess it's really about getting a common understanding of what is some of the clear messaging that is the most beneficial to the engagement and reputation of City Council, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to take time and it's going to change depending on like who we're talking to in terms of like what age, but the key messages to what we're trying to achieve absolutely should be worked with elected members. If that's what your question is, I do apologise. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wondered, the report that you've produced is based on last year's resident survey, but some of the things you've identified and some of the areas you've focused on are areas that, when you look at them, have actually increased in satisfaction over the last 12 months. So presumably the plan going forward will also take into account this year's results, because when I look at the things that we've been talking about the last 20 minutes, things like ease of having a say in council decision making, opportunities to have a say in council decision making, leadership, performance of the mayor and councillors, they've all gone up since last year. And yet they're the things that are addressed in this report. The things in terms of governance and reputation that have gone down significantly are things like customer service, being simple and easy to interact with, and that's not something that, as you know, is directly connected to elected member performance. So I'm a bit, I would like some reassurance that this year's results will also inform the plan going forward, and it's not just we're working a year behind all the time.
So you'll notice in the report there is a mention of an arena campaign. That was because of it was an easy quick win to grab out of the 2023 results to add into this report to say that we will be using the results from the 2023 as feeding into what we do for the How Does Council Work campaign, because I agree the timing is that we've now got these results. We might as well use all the content together. There's no point having it and not using it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. So I guess it's more of a comment. I'll restrain myself.
Okay, thank you. You're released. Well done. Okay, councillors, we've got the options there and the recommendation, which is around council noting the new and ongoing actions to raise awareness of the role of elected members and the work, the services, the operations of council. What we do is detailed in table 1 of the report titled Options to Address Key Issues Raised in the 2022, and I have to say probably 23 annual resident survey, because we are, that's to Councillor Johnson's comment that we should use all the information available to us. So I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If I could just make a couple of comments. Look, thanks to the staff. Again, this is an example of business as usual. It's quite hard to do at times. So thanks for the options there in the table. Look, some of you around the table are very good publicists. You do it very well, and others take more of a back seat role. But we all do our own things in our own ways, and I do think there is somewhat of a missing connection from a council operational perspective to help us all. So look, some are very strong, and we've got a very strong social platform, but that's only one way of getting to people. It's a very big way, and certainly connects with a lot of younger people. But again, it's only one way. Other councils do some stuff, and it's great, Liv, that you're connecting with others around what works for them. I favour that hybrid model, continuing on the really good work that you're doing online, but adding in some stories, some columns, which I have to say have been pretty minimal so far from all of us. All of us write different columns. All of us post some quite, I would say, apolitical, really good stuff about what's happening in and around the city and affecting this part of the world. So I would say to the officers, please pick up on that in some way. You know, we're doing a lot around events. We're acknowledging, I certainly as the Mayor acknowledge anybody in the room religiously, because I think it's good that our residents know, and just at their city welcoming powhiri just recently, the 4 or 5 councillors that attended, I just acknowledged them and said to the new residents, these are your representatives, go and talk to them, they're your advocates for things and decisions that happen in our city. So that's the sort of lens we need to put over things. I do think there has been a start to some of this work, but we've still got a long way to go. Where we are missing something is around residents not knowing the core stuff that we do, and some councillors, you know, it may not interest them that much, but actually roads and a lot of that stuff actually is core infrastructure business, and it does need to be addressed and actually tell the story of what we're doing, because there is stuff and there's reasons why stuff don't go 100% to plan, and we need to be really upfront and just say, look, you know, like Hamish said to us today, there's a whole lot of weather issues, and we have had the wettest winter for a long time, and that affects outcomes. So I would love to see some sort of targeted newsletter that did advocate for all the work that we do, it showed what elected members are doing as well. It pictured elected members and things, and actually their contact details, and that it was shared not only in a print form, but perhaps a hybrid, as I said, online, in some public places, using our partners and using the free aspect of the rates bill. I just think it's crazy that we're not using that. I get that it only goes to some people, but why do we discount it straight away? So this is the second time I've asked for this, so I don't want it to be a third. So I'll just leave that ball in the officer's court. Thank you. Right, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to speak briefly to say that it's a bit disappointing to hear that some councillors have taken the note in Table 1 regarding elected members attending schools as a threat or as an attack on what they do. I want to be very clear. I've said in this chamber a number of times, I think this goes beyond just the resident survey. This is about turnout. This is about general understanding of what we do as a council, and that is not there, particularly amongst our young people. They don't know who we are, they don't know what we do, and they don't know how we're different to central government. And so going to a school is very different to a formal council-led civics engagement program. I can call up Awatapu and say, can I come and give a civics talk to your year 13s? The answer is probably going to be no, because you, all of us here are political figures, and giving a politicised talk about civics education is not something that schools will have an appetite for, and fair enough. Whereas if we have a council-led engagement program where we say, would you be interested in us sending councillors to provide a civics education talk for an hour or whatever it may be to your year 12s and 13s, that then councillors get allocated, right, you're going to this school for this session, here's the content you're talking about, everybody will have their own flavour to it, but that is very different. I've adjudicated debates, I've gone to school prize givings, I've attended school functions, but simply wandering around in a suit and a badge is very different to providing a comprehensive civics education program and information for young people to understand. So I'd really urge councillors, don't take that as a threat and don't take it as a discouragement to do what we all are doing, what I do and what many others do, going and being engaged with schools. But this is something quite wholly separate to simply attending school events and being present. This is about providing a council-led, apolitical civics education service to our students. It's the first time we've had a chance to talk about this formally in the chamber. I've said it a year ago when I first got elected that I'd love to see a council-led civics engagement program, and I'm going to continue talking about it. And I know a number of other councillors in the room share my views on that, and that's why my question was trying to get to. I'd love for us to have a workshop or a discussion or something of some substance where we put a plan together and we actually develop an engagement program to students. And whether it needs to come through as a notice of motion or whether it needs to, what it needs to do, I don't know. I'm interested in having that conversation, but really, please do not take that as a threat to the work that we do, nor as a discouragement for the work that we do. This is an above and beyond thing that I feel would make more of a difference than anything else we could possibly do to engage young people with council, because I've said it before and I'll say it again, if you don't know what somebody does or what an organisation does, you're not going to vote for them, you're not going to be interested in them. And when we have young people who think that we run schools, police and hospitals, they're not going to be engaged with what council's doing. They don't understand the roads, the waters, the parks and the community centres. So we need to have some form of council-led, not councillor-led, school engagement program, and I just really encourage the officers. Brilliant to see, and I hope we get something where we can have a proper around the table discussion about it. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of points, please. I think the city would be absolutely blown away seeing how many events you attend each week, and your end of weekly report is always eye-opening for me. Just a couple of things. It was certainly eye-opening for me, the lack of understanding between central and local government in my election campaign. And I know on day one, lots of us at the table talked about civics education going to schools, and certainly a firm believer of that. A couple of weeks' time, I'm actually off to Pinnins, Palmerston North Normal, giving a year class a bit of a talk on civics, exactly this. So I'd love to be able to take a booklet along and say, hey, this is what we do. You know, talking about what we do and what council provides. You know, teaching city pride, etc. You know, using rubbish bins. You know, all the sort of things that should be taught at home and should be taught in schools. You know, lots of us at the moment are writing Guardian articles. I'd love to see those published on the council social media. You know, we're all standing in this room, sitting in this room for the city. I'd love to see the city supporting us a bit more as elected members. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good to see this report finally come back. It does, as the Chief Executive's alluded to, trace back to resolution 14th of December last year, and perhaps at that point we were all perhaps a bit optimistic around timeframes and perhaps what could have been brought in, but the resolution was actually seeking some information in the first half of this calendar year to give us some options around addressing the key challenges. So it was actually quite an open direction given to staff around the range of key challenges identified in that particular resident survey. So, you know, certainly the intent there and the hope had been that we could have landed some things that actually could have been entrained by now, rather than in September receiving a report that in my mind is perhaps a bit narrow in terms of scope, and then to hear during question time that some of the things that would be really nice to do, like actually understanding the problems, have to wait on focus groups, have to wait on budget. I would hope that when we give direction from council that we need something, we don't then need to go pass additional resolutions so that we get budget so that things actually happen. I'd hope that things actually do get brought through the planning processes so that we don't end up finding ourselves 9 months down the track learning that will be another 9 months before we have budget to actually start some groups to even help us understand some of the underpinning issues on some quite challenging things like low levels of trust. Those are quite fundamental things. You don't just fix those overnight. So I probably hear a little bit of that passion coming through, but I do, you know, have a level of concern over kind of how we've now gotten to this point. Having said that, a lot of what is put forward here, I think, is a good initial step. But I think when we get to that point of actually unpicking and understanding a bit more what is underneath some of those more challenging things like trust, etc., while acknowledging the incredible powers of marketing and comms, we may also need to be in a position where we're thinking about actually what we're doing underneath as well as how we're communicating it and how we're marketing it. So I am looking forward to the next stages and what actually comes through in terms of some of that deeper engagement. And I hope we keep an open mind at that point around how we actually are responding. I would be quite concerned if we end up in a new normal where 6 out of 4 residents don't trust and only 4 out of 10 do. We fundamentally need to be repositioning ourselves in this space, making sure that we're getting that right. And I will continue on this until we start to see those numbers lift. So thank you for the effort that has gone in here, and we'll look forward to the next stages there.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for those reflections on this. Mr. Mayor, I agree with your comments about the opportunity of a newsletter. I look forward to seeing what we can do in that space. This report, for me, actually doesn't just respond to the annual resident survey. It also speaks into the discussion we're about to have about voter turnout. And I think it's maybe no coincidence that we struggle with voter turnout when people don't really understand what council does, and particularly what the role of an elected member is. Now, I make no apologies for the shameless self-promotion that goes on my social media, because I think it's really important that we connect with our community to help them to understand what the role of an elected member is. But the risk in that is it looks like we just go to a lot of events and openings, and it doesn't really talk about the big issues that the Mayor was mentioning around your infrastructure and our work on those big ticket items, the big discussions, the big votes that you referenced in that report. So I think a newsletter will help us to bridge that gap between the things that are social media worthy and the things that are actually the bread and butter of council. So I look forward to that. I did just want to pick up on the issue I raised in questions, which is I don't think we should keep adding and adding to the things that we do. I think it's appropriate to evaluate what actions are successful and make intentional decisions about stopping doing other things and starting doing new things. But I think it's also important to connect with the institutional knowledge that sits around this table. Some of us have been here a very long time, members to the left and right, and have and have a lot of understanding of the things that have been tried before, some more successfully than others. I think we miss a trick if we don't connect with that. But I'm also a little concerned with some of those specific actions in that table which are listed as ongoing, as if they're a thing. And my experience tells me they're not a thing. So where it talks specifically about chairs of committees being invited to contribute, I've been a chair of a committee for 7 years. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've been asked to contribute to media opportunities for the council. So we might think that those are things that we're doing, but we're actually not. And I think it's time to have a little bit of assessment as not just whether these are new or ongoing, but how real they are, how effective they are, and if that's good use of ratepayer money. And on that subject, I would just like to draw people's attention to the fact that the Ministry of Education does have a civics education programme. It sits in the social science area. The material, the collateral is there for social science teachers to use if they choose. And I am not in this room to tell teachers what they should be teaching in their classrooms. Very happy to offer to provide support to that. But I really don't want to see council stepping into yet another unfunded mandate to develop collateral for a programme that actually already exists and teachers are choosing not to deliver. So I just want to have that as a caution before we rush headlong into that particular direction. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor McLeod.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to this. I totally agree with, all the comments that have been made by my colleagues. And I just want to thank the officers as well for the report. And also, I'm encouraged to see some of the opportunities being explored to increase engagement in the community and also improve our profile in the community. I think one of the things that I've encountered as a city councillor, and a lot of people come to me about some of the issues, and there seems to be a bit of confusion between what central government does and what the city council does, and let alone DHBs when they were still existing. And there was a bit of a confusion there about who does what, where and when, and that sort of things. And I think these opportunities, should they be explored more with the help of councillors. I hope that we'll probably have a workshop around this to also glean from the knowledge of councillors that have been here for a long time, and to sort of test what Councillor Bourne was saying, what works and what doesn't work as well. Very much encouraged by this, and personally, I'm a big advocate of civics education, and I understand that the Ministry of Education actually provides some of those services, but it's up to the school to decide what curriculum they teach. So schools can decide not to teach it or teach it and that sort of thing. But I think there's a gap there, and I think also local government can step into that space. Like Councillor Wood said, a concerted effort from the council, led by the council, spearheaded by the council as an organisation, as opposed to me going to Girls Eye, Freiburg, and providing courses on civics on my own initiative. And I think civics education is great. It strengthens the basic understanding of our structures of government, let alone how to engage with the local democratic process. And it's actually good for us because the more we consult, the more engagement we get from the community. The wider the views we get, the better it is for our decision-making processes, because it gives us an opportunity to capture the views of the community and new views sometimes that have not been explored by elected members or staff. So I think it's a good step in the right direction. After the election, we had a little report that came, and a recommendation was suggested and referred to the long-term plan around civics education. And I look forward to officers coming back to us with that report and engaging us as well, because I think we'll get some say, some stuff to say in that as well. I'll prefer probably a workshop, but I'll leave it to the CE and his team to explore that. But overall, thanks to the staff, and yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, just a quick right of reply before we finish up and have some long-awaited lunch. Look, to the officers, you've heard plenty of commentary from us. There's a fairly consistent theme coming through. And I think Councillor Bowen had a very good comment. A lot of these things you've listed here actually are being done. The ongoing nature of some of those things, they're taken as sort of, if you had a procedures manual, you'd say they're all, pack those away, they are done. It's the stuff that isn't being done, and we spoke about civics education, and I'd have to say I like some of the commentary around it being city-led rather than individually led. I would have to say it's more than just schools, because there's 70% of our population are not voting. So yes, I do agree we need to get to the young ones, but if we just solely focus on them, I still think we're going to have 70% of people not voting. So we've got to go to our residents, we've got to use our service clubs, we've got to use our marae, our businesses, our sports clubs, everybody, so they get a bit of an understanding and, you know, what are the barriers, the difference between central. I don't know how many times I get asked to fix immigration settings. Yeah, great. I've got a lot of sway in that area. So there's a clear lack of understanding on what's happening there. Also to the staff, I just want to repeat that hybrid newsletter which can be used overall. I think that's really missing. That would actually probably really help us around addressing some of these infrastructure things and getting the story out. Because some of these projects are really big, and we sometimes only say it's costing this much, it's being finished then, but there's a whole lot of elastic stuff in the middle which needs explaining. And then finally, the focus groups. And I'd have to say, Andrew, I think why aren't we doing that now? I mean, that can be done now. We don't need to wait to an LTP. So anyway, you're getting it loud and clear from us, so looking forward to some action. We'll vote. Thank you. That's passed, 14 votes for, none against. Thank you. Just before we break, I just want to acknowledge from Fulton Hogan, Bevan Sanderson and Vic Maggs, thank you for waiting so patiently, and you've probably learned a little bit about the inner workings of North City Council today, but we are here, they are here for another item. I want to move us into part 2 before we break, because then it'll allow them to not stay here for another 2 or 3 hours. So I'm just thinking of everybody here. So councillors, I want to move that we move into part 2, and for the reasons which will come up somewhere around negotiation and privacy, and they're listed on the screen there. So I'm happy to move, if we can get it up please. Okay, we're just adding names. Okay, all right. So again, welcome gentlemen. And I'm looking to move this, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If there's no commentary, we will vote please. And that has passed 13 votes for and none against. So I'll now adjourn the meeting till 1:30. So go and have a good lunch and be prepared for round 2 in the afternoon. And again, welcome chaps, and CE might shout you a coffee. Thank you.